father retired after 31 years with the same civil engineering firm, and my mother planned the party for 4 months. 4 months. She had a binder. I know about the binder because my aunt mentioned it during Thanksgiving. The way you mention something you assume everyone already knows. Your mom's been working on that retirement party binder since August, she said, passing the green beans. I nodded like I had been kept in the loop. I had not been kept in the loop. The party was scheduled for the second Saturday in March at a private room in a restaurant called Harrington's, which is the kind of place that has cloth napkins and a pre-ex-fixie menu, and where my father had taken my brother to celebrate every significant thing my brother had ever done. The bar exam, the promotion, the time he ran a half marathon, which, I want to be clear, is not a full marathon. I found out about the party the way I find out about most things in my family. My brother texted me a week before. Hey, Dad's retirement dinner is Saturday the 14th. Harrington's, 6 p.m. You coming? Not, we'd love for you to be there. Not, Mom wanted me to reach out. Just the information, stripped of everything, the way you text a coworker about a meeting you were both required to attend. I texted back that I would be there. He sent a thumbs up emoji. That was the extent of my involvement in the planning of my own father's retirement party. I want to tell you a little about my father, because otherwise none of what happened makes sense. Or maybe it makes too much sense, and I just need you to understand why it still managed to hurt. My father is a man who measures success in things you can point to: buildings, bridges, overpasses. He drove us past a water treatment facility once when I was in middle school and said with genuine quiet pride, "I helped design that." My brother was in the back seat playing a Game Boy. I was the one who looked up. I was always the one who looked up. He wanted us both to go into something concrete. My brother became a lawyer, which my father considered a reasonable second choice, something with suits and briefcases and a nameplate on a desk. I became a therapist, a licensed clinical social worker, to be precise, which is a title that requires a master's degree and 2 years of supervised clinical hours and a licensing exam and ongoing continuing education, but which my father has, for the better part of a decade, referred to as the counseling thing. Not dismissively, exactly. More like the way someone refers to a hobby they respect but don't quite understand. How's the counseling thing going? The way you'd ask someone how their garden was doing. My mother is softer about it, but no different in the ways that matter. She tells her friends, I work with people who are going through hard times, which is technically accurate, and also manages to make it sound like I work at a crisis hotline staffed by volunteers. She is proud of me in the way that you are proud of something you can't quite explain at a dinner party. She loves me. I have never doubted that. Love and understanding are not the same thing. And in my family, that distance between them has always been exactly the width of my career choice. My brother's framed law school diploma hangs in my parents' living room. Mine does not. I have a good job. I have a caseload of 60-something clients. Most of them refer through a community mental health center and a small private practice I built on the side over 3 years. I was, as of that March, about 6 weeks away from finding out whether a federal research grant I had applied for, a 2-year, $340,000 grant through SAMHSA to study integrated care models for underserved rural populations, had been awarded to my team. My parents did not know about the grant application. I had mentioned it once, in passing, over Christmas. My mother had said, "That sounds complicated," and changed the subject to whether my brother's firm was going to make him a senior partner. I did not bring it up again. I drove to Harrington's alone. This is a small thing that I keep returning to, because it is the kind of small thing that accumulates. My brother and his wife were coming from their house, which is 12 minutes from my parents' house, and it would have been a very natural thing for all of them to drive over together, and for someone to mention, at some point in the preceding week, that they were doing this, so that I could have met them in the parking lot, or ridden along, or at minimum not pulled up alone to valet, and stood on the sidewalk for 6 minutes waiting to see a familiar face before going inside. I stood on the sidewalk for 6 minutes. Then I went inside. The hostess walked me back to the private room, which my mother had decorated with framed photos and a banner that said, "Congratulations, Frank," in navy blue. There were maybe 40 people there, colleagues of my father's, some family friends, a few relatives I recognized, and a few I had to reintroduce myself to. My parents were at the center of the room with my brother and his wife, the 4 of them in a loose circle that looked like what it was, the family unit, assembled. I stood at the edge of the room for a moment before my mother noticed me. She came over and hugged me. The kind of hug that is genuine but brief. The kind that communicates that she is glad I am there, and also that she has a lot of other people to attend to. She told me I looked nice. I was wearing the blue dress I wear to every professional event, because it is the dress that makes me look like I know what I am doing. And my mother said I looked nice the way you say someone looks nice when you notice they made an effort without registering what the effort was for. Your table is over there, she said, gesturing toward the far side of the room. I followed her gesture. Table 9 was near the window. That's where my brother and his wife were sitting, with two of my father's colleagues and their spouses, the people my father has known for 20 years, the ones he mentions by name at Christmas. Table 9 was the table where, I understood in the way you understand things you were not told directly, the family was sitting. My place card was not at table 9. My place card was at table 12. Table 12 was positioned near the door to the service hallway. Not in the service hallway, I want to be accurate about this, but close enough that I could hear. For the entirety of dinner, the swing of the door and the particular sound of a commercial kitchen on a Saturday night. There were 4 other people at table 12, none of whom I had ever met. A colleague of my father's who had retired 2 years prior, and whom I gathered had been invited mostly out of obligation, his wife. A woman who turned out to be the daughter of one of my father's old bosses, there representing her mother, who was too ill to attend, and one empty chair, which eventually, about 15 minutes into cocktail hour, was occupied by a man I did not recognize. He was maybe 60, in a very good suit, with the kind of easy confidence that does not announce itself. He sat down, looked around the table, and introduced himself to each of us in turn. His name was Dr. Whitfield. He said he was an old friend of the family, though I did not recognize him, and he did not elaborate, and I did not push, because I had spent most of cocktail hour reminding myself that I was an adult who had chosen to be here and could choose to behave gracefully, and small talk with strangers was well within my capabilities. So I made small talk with Dr. Whitfield. He asked what I did. I told him. I said I was a licensed clinical social worker, that I ran a caseload through a community mental health center and had a small private practice, and that I did some research work on the side. I said it the way I have learned to say it in rooms like this, which is quickly and with enough specificity that it does not sound like a hobby, but without so much detail that I have to watch someone's eyes go polite and distant. Dr. Whitfield did not go polite and distant. Dr. Whitfield did not go polite and distant. He asked which population I primarily worked with. I told him rural and semi-rural adults with limited access to mental health services, a lot of co-occurring substance use, a lot of people who had never seen a therapist before. I was the first one who called them back. He nodded slowly, the way someone nods when they're actually thinking about what you said and not just waiting for their turn. Are you the one who put in for the SAMHSA Integrated Care Grant? He asked. I looked at him. I'm sorry? The Rural Integrated Care Study. There was a proposal that came through. The PI was listed at a community mental health center in. He named the county. My county. I reviewed the summary at a conference in January. The design was strong. I remember thinking the team was small for what they were taking on, but the methodology was solid. That's mine, I said. He smiled. I thought the name sounded familiar. I wasn't sure. I should pause here and explain that Dr. Tom Whitfield, I would learn over the course of dinner, is not a person whose familiarity with your grant proposal is a small thing. He sits on 2 federal advisory boards. He has spent 30 years in public health research and policy. He was at my father's retirement party because he and my father had worked on a municipal infrastructure project together in 1997 and had stayed loosely in touch, the way men of a certain generation stay loosely in touch, through Christmas cards and the occasional email. He did not know who I was before he sat down. He knew who I was by the salad course. We talked through most of dinner, not exclusively. The table had other conversations, and I made sure to include the retired colleague and his wife and the woman whose mother could not come, but we kept returning to each other. He asked about my research questions. I asked about his work. He told me that the funding landscape for rural mental health was shifting, that there was more federal attention on integrated care models than there had been in a decade, that my timing on the grant was actually good. At some point during the entree, my father came over to check on the table. This happens at parties like this. The guest of honor makes rounds, stops at each table, says a few words. My father got to table 12 somewhere around the chicken piccata. He put his hand on my shoulder when he reached me, which I appreciated. He shook hands with the retired colleague. He nodded at the colleague's wife. He smiled at the woman whose mother couldn't come and said something kind about her mother. Then he looked at Dr. Whitfield. "Rich," he said, with the particular warmth he reserves for people he has known a long time. "I'm glad you made it. Wouldn't have missed it," Dr. Whitfield said. And then, with the easy conversational tone of someone who assumes everyone at the table already knows, "You must be proud of this one. I was just telling her the grant proposal her team submitted is some of the most thoughtful rural care research I've seen come through in years." My father's hand was still on my shoulder. I felt it go very slightly still. "The grant?" he said. "SAMHSA," Dr. Whitfield said. "The Integrated Care Study. She told me the notice of award comes out in a few weeks. Frank, if it comes through, that's serious money for serious work. You should be proud." My father said, "I didn't know about a grant." He said it not to me. He said it to the table, or to the middle distance, or to the version of the evening he had planned that did not include this information. He said it like a man who has just been told a fact about his own house that he was not aware of. I did not say anything. I could have said, "I mentioned it at Christmas." I could have said, "I've been working on this for 18 months. I could have said a great many things that were true, and that would have, in the moment, felt like relief, and in the long run, felt like the wrong choice. I looked at my father, and I said, "It's been a big project. I wasn't sure it was going to come together." He nodded. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Yeah, that's good." And he moved on to the next table. My mother found me during dessert. She came over and sat in the empty chair that one of the other guests had vacated, and she looked at me with an expression I have seen my whole life and still haven't fully learned how to read. It is an expression that contains, simultaneously, something that might be pride and something that might be the complicated feeling of realizing you didn't know something you maybe should have known. "Richard Whitfield was telling me about your research," she said. I said yes. He said it was important work. I said I thought so too. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You never really told us about it." I looked at her. I thought about the Christmas dinner. I thought about the binder I was not consulted on. I thought about the text from my brother. I thought about my place card at table 12, and the sound of the kitchen door, and the 6 minutes I stood alone on the sidewalk. "I mentioned it," I said, "at Christmas." She looked at me with that expression again, and then she said, I know we don't always," and she stopped, and she started again, and she said, "You should have pushed more." I thought about that. I turned it over. "Maybe," I said. I did not say, "That is not how it works." I did not say, "I have been pushing for 32 years and I've learned something about walls." I did not say, "The thing about a person who has always been the background is that eventually they stop raising their hand." I said maybe because I meant it, partially. Maybe I could have pushed more. Maybe I owed it to myself to push more. Maybe the lesson I was still in the middle of learning was not about my family at all, but about what I was willing to say out loud in rooms where I wasn't sure I'd be heard. My brother found me by the coat check at the end of the night. "Hey," he said. Dad seemed pretty floored about the grant thing. "Yeah," I said. "Why didn't you say anything?" I looked at him. He was genuine. I want to give him that. He was not being cruel. He actually wanted to know. "I did say something," I said. Nobody asked follow-up questions. He opened his mouth and then closed it. And then he said, "That's fair," which is, in my experience, the highest form of acknowledgement my brother is capable of in situations like this, and I took it. I drove home alone that night, and I did not cry, which I considered an achievement. I did not cry because I had decided, somewhere between the salad course and dessert, that the evening was not actually a wound. It was information. It was a very clear picture of a dynamic that I had been describing to myself in soft language for years, calling it complicated and different expectations, and they just don't really understand my field, when the clearer language was simply that I had made myself easy to overlook, and my family had been happy to oblige, and at some point the only person who could change that was me, not by having a confrontation at a retirement dinner, not by making my father feel bad on a night he deserved to feel celebrated, but quietly, in the months after, in the way I answered the question, how are things going? With specificity, with the names of things, with the refusal to summarize myself in ways that made me smaller. The grant came through 6 weeks later. $340,000 over 2 years. My name is Principal Investigator. It was a Friday afternoon, and I was between sessions, and I read the email 3 times standing in the hallway outside my office, with my coat still on because I had just gotten back from lunch. I called my best friend first. I called my supervisor second. I sat in my car for a few minutes just being quiet with it, which is how I mark the things that matter. Then I texted my mother. Got the grant, wanted you to know. She called me within 2 minutes, which is the fastest she has ever called me back for anything. She was crying a little. She said she was proud of me. She said she had been telling her friends about the research. She said she wished she understood it better, and asked if I could explain it to her sometime. I said yes, I meant it. My father called that evening. He said congratulations. He said it was a big deal. He asked, haltingly, the kind of question someone asks when they are trying to learn the vocabulary of something they've never paid attention to before. He asked what integrated care meant, exactly. I explained it. He listened. He didn't fully understand it, I think, but he asked one follow-up question, which was one more than he had ever asked before. We talked for 22 minutes, which I noted because it was the longest phone call we had had in years that was not about logistics. I did not tell him about the retirement dinner. I did not name the distance or the seat assignment or the text from my brother. I don't think I needed to. I think the conversation we had on that Friday phone call was the beginning of something, not the resolution of everything, and I have learned, professionally, personally, slowly, that there is a difference between those two things. The difference matters. I am still learning how to take up the right amount of space in rooms where I used to make myself small. It is not a fast process. Some days I catch myself summarizing, softening, waiting to be asked. But I catch it now, which I didn't always. The diploma is still not on my parents' wall, but I have not asked them to put it there because the validation I used to want from that wall is not something a wall can actually give you. I know that now. I know where it comes from. It comes from reading an award email 3 times in a coat in a hallway and knowing, without needing anyone to confirm it, that you built something real. I've thought a lot about what actually happened that night, not the surface of it, the table assignment, the text from my brother, the 6 minutes on the sidewalk, but the structure underneath it, the cause and effect that had been running quietly for years before it finally showed up in a seating chart. The truth is, I had trained the people around me, not intentionally, but every time I softened what I did for easier consumption, every time I let a changed subject stay changed, every time I decided it wasn't worth pushing, I was teaching my family that I didn't require their attention. And they learned the lesson well. Families are good students when the curriculum is comfortable for them. That's not blame. That's just how it works. What we accept, we teach others to offer us. Dr. Whitfield didn't know any of that when he sat down at table 12. He just asked a normal question, "What do you do?" And I answered it like it was worth answering. That's the thing I keep coming back to. He didn't discover something hidden. He discovered something I had stopped fully saying out loud in certain rooms. And the difference between being seen and being invisible is sometimes just that, whether you let yourself be named. My father said he didn't know about the grant, and he was right. He didn't. That's on both of us, and I've made peace with my half of it. I could have pushed. I chose not to because pushing felt futile. And futility is a story I had been telling myself for so long I had stopped questioning whether it was still true. The grant changed something, but not because of the money or the recognition. It changed something because it forced me to practice saying the real version of my work out loud, in the application, in the meetings, in conversations with people like Dr. Whitfield, until I believed it fully myself. And once you believe something fully yourself, it becomes much harder for a room to talk you out of it. Integrity, I think, is the long game of being consistent about who you are, even when the audience isn't paying attention. I had been doing the work. I had been building something real. The integrity was already there. What I was still learning was the second part, the part where you don't hide it to make other people comfortable. Intelligence without the courage to claim it is just private satisfaction, and I had been privately satisfied for a long time while wondering why nothing changed. My father asked me one follow-up question on that phone call. One. But he asked it, and I answered it like it was worth answering. That's where it starts. Not in a confrontation, not in a grand moment, not in someone finally coming around completely. It starts in one follow-up question that you answer like you mean it, because you've finally decided that being understood is something you're willing to work toward, even slowly, even without guarantees. I still drive to things alone sometimes, but I don't stand on the sidewalk anymore.